This is the Voice of Russia from London. I'm Tim Eckott with today's VOR debate. Fox hunting is a symbol in many ways of Britishness, or certainly of one version of the image many people have in their heads about what symbolises the British countryside. Hunting horns and men in pink coats accompanied by foxhounds were for several centuries the staple decorative element of country houses and pubs alike. But after years of lobbying from anti-hunt groups and animal rights campaigners, hunting with packs of hounds was made illegal in England and Wales by the Hunting Act of 2004. The subject provoked heated parliamentary debate and strong feelings on both sides. But it remains legal to chase from hiding or flush out wild foxes with up to 2 dogs in order to then shoot the fox. Now, a new veterinary study has provoked calls for a relaxation of the ban on flushing out foxes with dogs. The Federation of Welsh Farmers Packs represents hunters who shoot foxes, and they report that a full pack of dogs is more than twice as successful at finding foxes than simply a pair of dogs. That's the legal limit at the moment. Now, the Prime Minister, David Cameron, has already indicated he may be sympathetic to the Welsh proposal to relax the laws, raising the danger in some people's minds that this could be the start of a move to legalise hunting once again. To discuss the topic, I'm joined today in the studio by the ecologist and author Hugh Warwick and by Peter Brook, the owner and director of Bailey's Hunting Directory. Meanwhile, on the phone lines, we have David Thomas, who is Secretary of the Federation of Welsh Farmers Packs, and from the League Against Cruel Sports, the Director of Campaigns, Dawn Varley. Welcome, everyone. Let's start with you, David Thomas in Wales. Can you explain briefly why you think that using more than 2 dogs to flush the foxes out is a good idea, and why indeed shooting foxes is necessary?
I've been a farmer for 40 years and still have sheep. And since the Hunting Act came in, we've had an ever-increasing number of lambs lost to fox predation. Prior to the hunting ban, somewhere between 10 and 15,000 foxes were killed in upland forest areas of Wales by our members. And since then, the numbers that have been killed has dropped into the hundreds. And the whole object of our form of pest control brackets hunting was to have the least density of foxes in the countryside at lambing time. So if you had 100 foxes in 5,000 acres, you'd have obviously a lot less problems from predation if you've only got 10 foxes in 5,000 acres.
OK, David Thomas, Secretary of the Federation of Welsh Farmers Packs, thank you for explaining the situation. Here in the studio, Hugh Warwick, ecologist and author. You, I believe, have a basic problem with the attitude to wildlife inherent in this very discussion.
No, I think that's a really good point. I mean, we currently have a government in the United Kingdom that seems hell-bent on ignoring essential precepts of ecology. I mean, that's my background. I've been studying hedgehogs for the last 30 years. You begin to get a good understanding of it. And so far, the government has gone hell-bent to kill badgers because of trying to prop up the price of milk. They've gone hell-bent on trying to get buzzards killed so that their friends can go and shoot more pheasants. They're not even interested in looking at controlling the use of neonicotinoid agrotoxins, which are killing bees. And so I would be very suspicious of any moves in this sort of direction because it's not going to be bounded by good science. And certainly the report, which has been put together by David's team, I mean, it's very interesting. I mean, it's not peer-reviewed, and it's not actually something which has been done with great sort of statistical rigour. But it also ignores probably one of the biggest problems that any proponent of hunting has, which is that throughout hunting's history, it has been couched in terms of enormous amounts of dishonesty. When I was at school, we had the local hunt come to visit us. They talked about the massive damage that foxes cause to livestock. But the more I looked into it and the more I realised it's nothing to do with that. They're desperately trying to get back the old ways of hunting, because hunting for some people, for some strange people, is just good fun. The hunting of animals to kill them is fun, and I simply don't understand that.
You simply think that killing foxes is unnecessary?
Well, if you're going to look at what's happening on the Welsh hill farms, you need to start starts taking a step back and working out that for all of these sheep farmers who have been suffering depredations from foxes, I mean, this particular year they refer to a late cold snap when the sheep were already out, a lot of lambs were caught in the cold. But you must remember that the average subsidy paid to the sheep farmers of Wales by us is £53,000 per farmer. And of this, they make an average net income of about £33,000. So basically, they're losing £20,000 out there. Now, I think it's therefore reasonable for us to be looking at the way that people manage the land in the Welsh uplands in particular. And we should start looking at trying to imagine it differently, because going hell-bent for sheep is doing nothing more than destroying what could be a really rich ecosystem.
Dawn Varley on the line from the League Against Cruel Sports.
Well, first I'd like to congratulate Hugh on a lot of the points he's raised. Actually, they're points that we would raise in terms of looking at the basic ecology of the situation. Is the fox a problem in terms of predation on lambs? But taking it back to the issue of is it in the best interest of the fox to actually use more dogs to flush it out? Well, I think we're missing the point. The fundamental question is, do foxes need controlling this way in the first place? The research that's been put out there, it hasn't yet been peer-reviewed, and we would also question the statistical analysis. So there's fundamental questions that remain unanswered in terms of the research here. Now, of course, the League Against Cruel Sports, we actually celebrate our 90th anniversary next year, and a good proportion of those 9 decades were spent campaigning for abolition of cruel sports. Ultimately, I think what we see here is a group of people who want to continue a traditional practice that the British people quite rightly pushed for a ban on in terms of hunting a mammal with dogs, obviously with certain exceptions. And we have a group of people here desperate to see full repeal of the Hunting Act, knowing full well that that is out of their reach. And this to us absolutely seems like this is hunting interests going round the back door to try and find a way to resurrect hunting again.
OK, Dawn Varley from the League Against Cruel Sports. Peter Brook, I'd like to bring you in. How do you respond to some of the charges there, that this is bringing back hunting in the traditional sense by the back door? You represent or have dealings with a lot of people whose businesses are connected with country pursuits. Is this about money, as Hugh suggests, in the end, and how we manage the countryside? Is it about people's livelihoods? Where do you stand?
I think the key element is it's about utility and welfare. David's talking about the sheep on the hills and the welfare of the lambs. Certainly, there is evidence of significant increase in predation of the fox on the hill farms. I take Hugh's point that there may be a better way of looking at the ecology, but currently we've got some really good hill farmers with sheep on the hills. It certainly isn't about business. It certainly isn't.
Not big business, but a lot of people said that one thing that happened as an unintended consequence of banning hunting was that a lot of people whose rural businesses relied on peripheral activities to do with the hunt lost out.
And they certainly did. And a lot of the people that I've met over the last few years have had to change what they do in order to accommodate those changes. But we have a situation in England and Wales where 2 hounds are allowed to flush out foxes. And yet in Scotland, it's a complete pack. There's a disparity there between what happens in England and Wales and what happens in Scotland. Now, if it was such a big issue, I'm sure that the Dawn and her colleagues with the League would be campaigning to have a parity with the English and Wales situation in Scotland, but they're not.
Is that true, Dawn Varley? Why are you not doing that?
Well, what we're concentrating on here at the moment is we're concentrating on the Hunting Act 2004, which represents England and Wales. Ultimately, this is about how we treat animals and how we deal with perceived problems in terms of conflict between animals and humans.
This is the Voice of Russia from London. I'm Tim Eckott with today's VOR debate. All right, well, I'd like to go back to David Thomas there in Wales. David, your members are the people who are mooting this very suggestion that perhaps using more than 2 dogs would be a better way of controlling the fox population. Could you respond to the points Hugh Warwick raised, that actually we're talking about the wrong thing here, and that shooting foxes and farming sheep are both illogical ways of managing the countryside environment.
I don't know what he wants to put in its place. I presume he's works along the same basis as George Monbiot and wants to turn Wales into a playground for wolves, which is not something that we would want to see happen. What do you propose to replace the income that farming generates and the jobs it generates?
Okay, can I just? I can give you that one quite clearly, David. The percentage of the Welsh population which is either in full-time or part-time employment as a farmer is 1.5% of the country. Yet somehow they've managed to get hold of and are managing 75% of that countryside. This is an extremely inequitable mix of management options. But we're already paying, on average, £53,000 to every single one of these sheep farmers. They'll still be getting a vast amount of money from the taxpayer.
Can I just say that 1.5% of the population may be farmers, but all that farm's income is spent in the local community. There's an awful lot of feed merchants, there's an awful lot of machinery suppliers. It's a huge industry, it's not just 1.5%. And I totally disagree with you that the £53,000 paid to farmers is actually helping farm incomes. What that's doing is keeping food cheap and subsidising the big five supermarkets. If you take the whole of Wales farming out of farming, where are you going to get your food from?
Can we just focus briefly now on the issue of the foxes? If the foxes were not controlled, and indeed were not controlled by flushing them out so that they could be shot, how much damage would that do to the Welsh farmers?
In 1980, Dr. Lloyd produced a study for the Ministry of Agriculture, and in that study he concluded that 0.53% of lambs were lost to foxes. Now, if you look at the number of lambs in the last the number of ewes in the last agricultural census, there was 4 million ewes in Wales. That equals 5 million lambs. If you lose 0.53% to foxes, that's 26,500 lambs killed by foxes in Wales, which equates to £1.35 million. And those figures were done in 1980, when both sheep numbers and fox numbers were a lot lower. If you increase that to 1%, you're looking at a loss to farming in Wales of nearly 2.6 million. And I can prove that foxes kill lambs, because when you skin a lamb that's been ripped apart by foxes, you see lots of teeth marks all through the neck and in the skin. And you've only got to measure the canine teeth, and you can establish whether it's a dog, a fox, an otter, or whatever it is that killed that lamb.
Dawn Varley from the League Against Cruel Sports, what do you think about shooting foxes?
Can I just come back to David's point there? I think there's an absolutely crucial thing that David had just admitted. 0.53% of lambs are lost to foxes, 0.53. We are not talking about a massive problem with foxes predating on lambs. We are.
Well, he's put that into figures. That if you're talking about 5 million sheep, that's over 26,000 lambs.
You're still talking, the easiest way to look at this in terms of percentages, so that means that of all the impactful things that are happening to lambs to kill them before they can become a profitable commodity, foxes are probably at the bottom of the list. Foxes, for want of a better phrase, are being made a scapegoat in the same way that badgers in the UK are currently, or in England, pardon me, are currently being made a scapegoat for bovine TB. And it just seems absolutely appalling in this day and age that the first thing we do when we hit problems in the environment is that we point the finger at animals. We need to take a step back and look at how we deal with our relationship with animals. And I'd also say it's a major concern to us. The farmers really do seem to have the ear of the British government at the moment.
I just want to ask you, Dawn Varley, what do you think the farmers should do? Should this just be an acceptable level of natural loss? Should they just allow the foxes to take whatever they need?
I think at the current time we're lacking a peer review of this research, we're lacking evidence of increased predation, we're lacking evidence of the increased number of foxes that David is talking about. What I would say is it's basic common sense that we have to share our environment with animals. Foxes is one of those. So upland farmers should accept to some extent that they have to share their fields with foxes and a certain percentage of lambs will be taken.
What's the answer to this, Hugh Warwick? And I'll ask you, David and Peter again. Should the government just pay farmers for lambs that are taken by foxes so that the foxes can eat them.
Well, we are already paying the farmers a great deal of money, as I say, £53,000. I'm fascinated that the Federation for Welsh Farmers, PACS, is keen to see an end to the subsidy system in Wales. I mean, once the subsidy system goes in Wales, the sheep will go. The sheep will go. There will be no more.
Are you keen, David?
I didn't say that I wanted to see the end of subsidies. I said that the subsidy paid to farmers was actually subsidising supermarkets and consumers to have cheap food.
David, because you're there in Wales and you've got the sheep and the foxes around you, what do you think to Dawn Varley's argument that this is about our relationship with nature? Would you think farmers would accept a certain level of predation by the fox as part of the countryside?
Absolutely not. I mean, we spend the whole year. We buy ewes in the autumn. We buy tups in the autumn. We've been having to pay in the region of £150 to buy a single ewe and £700-800 to buy a tup. You then go to the massive amount of work where most farmers work 24 hours a day virtually for 6 weeks at lambing time. And there are natural losses in farming, but when you get viable lambs out in the field after you've got them through that stage, it's just never going to be acceptable just because somebody thinks it's a wonderful idea, who doesn't live in the country, which is not necessarily relevant, but has got no experience or hands-on experience of trying to make a living in the country, says, oh, well, you should just accept that foxes are going to kill loads of lambs and put up with it. No, thank you.
0.53%. 0.53% is a really thing. I'd love to see the list of the impacts on lambs from birth through to death. Where does fox kill come into that list? How high up the list is it?
You haven't actually listened to anything I've said. I actually said 0.53% in 1980. I would say it's doubled to 2%. And what I'm saying as well is that foxes will tend to prey on one particular farm. So if one particular farm loses 50 lambs, that equates to £5,000. Would you like to give me 5% of your money out of your back pocket and say, here you are, I don't care if you steal it off me?
Remember, we're already giving you £53,000 per year. You're
not giving me anything. The average income for a hill livestock farmer for the last 5 years, according to FUW figures, is £21,000. That's the profit or income. Take that subsidy away, and farm prices will either have to go up, or you'll have to import your food from abroad.
Peter Brook, where do you see this economic argument going?
Well, if we stick with this 0.53% that both Dawn and Hugh have got issues with, if it happens to be your farm that's affected by a particular fox, it's a lot more than 0.53%. It's your livelihood disappearing. There is a fundamental connection between predation and food production. And if people want cheap food, that's one of the costs that it's a hidden cost to them. They don't want to hear about it.
What is the acceptable level of fox predation in your book?
I don't think you can put it in numeric terms.
Does that mean foxes must be eradicated totally from the British landscape?
I don't think anybody would even suggest that eradication is either desirable or sensible, but a form of control in certain areas based on both utility and welfare certainly is.
Dawn Varley from the League Against Cruel Sports, there must be some level of control. Do you accept that?
No, not until we see a full scientific account for the need to control animals.
But Dawn, if I may, you had science in both the Scott Henderson report and the Burns inquiry, and the League were very, very selective about the evidence that it gave to its supporters out of those two inquiries. So even if there is an evidence-led report and evidence-based, it will still be cherry-picked for certain figures that support your argument. Your fundamental argument is that you've now got the Hunting Act in, and you'll do almost anything to keep it where it is without looking at the utility and welfare argument.
We can absolutely see what this is, and this is a move to weaken the Hunting Act. It has nothing to do with lamb predation. It has nothing to do with just helping upland farmers. If this proposal was put through, then what you would see would be a gaping hole in the Hunting Act that most likely would apply to all hunts out there. So we're not just talking upland packs, we're talking talking all hunts up and down the country, and we will resist all efforts to amend the Hunting Act. But what this is, when you unpick it, or when even you scratch at the surface, is a piece of research that falls over on so many levels, it's almost laughable.
David Thomas, can you just respond to that? Are you trying to bring hunting in by the back door?
Absolutely not. This is farmer-led for pest control. I'm quite happy that the research will stand up to peer review. But for Dawn to rubbish it, I'd like to know whether her qualifications are greater than Dr. Jeremy Naylor, who's Bachelor of Science and got a PhD. The big question is whether, if the Hunting Act, at the moment, if it's left going to make such a coach and horses through the Hunting Act, why don't the hunts go out at the present time with 2 dogs and guns if that would solve all the problems? They're not. You're not going to have somebody riding around on a horse with a shotgun shooting foxes to make it legal. It's ludicrous to say that. This makes me so mad that farming has to suffer for basically what I see a bunch of clowns who are clueless.
David, can you just respond, though, to the point we touched on a minute or two ago? Is there a level of acceptable fox population that you can tolerate? I know for an individual farmer, we can talk about the economics there, but how do farmers and foxes live side by side?
Actually, that is a very difficult question to answer, because when I'm losing lambs, I would like to exterminate every fox that ever breathes. But we also live in the country, and, I don't mind seeing an occasional fox. I wish some people would realize that the people that work and live in the country are entitled to some say in what happens in the countryside. We have been having other people's opinions shoved down our throats all the time, and this is a small attempt to get back on the basis that farmers need to control foxes. This is not led by people in red coats. It is led by farmers.
But presumably, Hugh Warwick, you would say it is still being led by an attitude to money and what the countryside gives us in economic terms.
First of all, I need to say something quite surprising. I actually agree with David on one of the points he was making, and that's about the cost of food. Our food is far too cheap, and that buying sheep and buying livestock at such a ridiculously low price is an obscenity. But the thing which is worth looking at is, the Sunday Telegraph, which is one of the most swivel-eyed of all of the newspapers, talked about this debate on Sunday, and they said that it is essentially a sop to the land-earning classes in the Midlands who are being threatened with losing a small patch of their land for a high-speed train going through.
So this is a political sop by the Conservative Party to woo countryside members who may be disaffected by the idea of HS2.
Absolutely. If I hadn't read that in the Sunday Telegraph, I would have assumed it was absolutely nonsense, but obviously it is an august journal. But finally, the point that was made earlier, I think it was by Dawn, and it's to do with our relationship with the natural world. At the moment, we have a government that seems hell-bent on using lethal control at every possible opportunity and ignoring possibilities for reducing it. We've got an opportunity of looking at the management of the Welsh uplands in particular, which could see continued employment for the farmers that are still there, which could see a massive increase to societal benefits through less flooding, through less erosion, through less drought, because we get rid of these sheep, have a bigger, braver look at the way we manage our uplands.
This is the Voice of Russia from London. I'm Tim Eckott with today's VOR debate. You're speaking for the sheep farmers, David Thomas. Do you accept any part of Hugh Warwick's assertion there that sheep are basically bad for the country?
No, I don't. And I really don't believe that Welsh sheep farmers cause droughts either.
And David Thomas, again, can you see that there is this conflict between what a farmer wants in terms of his business and what the countryside may need on a wider ecological level? You said you don't mind seeing the odd fox, but do you accept the fox as a necessary part of the natural world?
I think I probably do, yes.
Yeah.
And Peter?
Absolutely. Speaking before the debate, I mentioned to Hugh that at home we have both foxes and badgers on our own land, and I'm delighted to see them.
But you wouldn't be delighted if they were causing you financial harm.
I've got a small pack of rare breed sheep, and they don't interfere with that particular pack. But if it was my only sort of income, there'd certainly be a need to manage them to a level that was sustainable.
Dawn Varley, let me bring you in one more time from the League Against Cruel Sports. How would you remove foxes if you were to accept that some of them needed to be removed?
Again, I'm afraid I'm not going to answer that question. What I'm going to say is that we fundamentally question the need to actually control foxes.
Don't you have to answer the question, Dawn, if you accept that there are farmers whose livelihood is being impacted?
I accept as David's own quoted statistics of 0.53%, which I think is absolutely crucial to this. I think supermarkets, in their budgets, in their planning each year, they plan for losses. They plan for people nicking things from their land. That's not a fox, that's someone stealing from the shelves. This is, unfortunately, an issue where we have to coexist with wildlife. You have to take account of that. And that 0.53% with 53k's worth of subsidy for each farmer, I think the arguments just don't stack up for increased fox control in this case.
So you simply will not make any response to the suggestion that foxes may ever need to be controlled?
What we always say is we say where there is a problem between man and wildlife, the science needs to show what exactly the problem is. Certainly the science isn't showing that there's increased number of foxes or that there's increased predation at the moment. And then where that science shows there is a problem, then we look at all available methods of control. Again, I fundamentally reject what David's calling for.
Well, I think, David Thomas, you're saying you've got this veterinary report that is showing higher levels of predation and, by implication, a greater number of foxes. Hugh Warwick, you're an ecologist. What do you make of that argument? Does it seem likely to you that there are now more foxes?
We haven't been out there and counted them yet, and that would be a lovely job, and I'm available. No, I mean, it's something, I think Dawn is right. We need to see the science of this thing. As David pointed out early on, thousands of foxes are being killed on the roads, probably far more foxes being killed on the roads now than were ever killed by the hunts. But going right back to it, we were told by the hunts that they were absolutely necessary for pest control, and then the undercover work done by amazingly brave people, non-violently going and filming in places where they weren't allowed to do, showed how that foxes were being bred by the hunts. This wasn't about pest control. This was simply about providing entertainment for people. Now, right at the moment, this may be being couched in terms of helping the heavily subsidised hill farmers of Wales. But in the long term, this is absolutely definitely a foot in the door. It's the beginning of attempts by a very, very anti-wildlife government to reintroduce what really is something which we should have grown out of.
Peter Brook, finally from you, hunting is entertainment?
I think part of it certainly is, but and I think he's right. In the early days, there was a justification for purely pest control. I think we've got to be adult about things and say, actually, there are two elements to hunting. There are the hunt staff with hounds who are involved in control. You fund those with an element of the field, the supporters, all the background activities that fund that kennel of hounds, of the horses, and pay the staff's wages. So yes, there is an element of fun there, of people who follow on foot or follow on horseback, absolutely. But the workload is divided between the hounds and the hunt staff. So yeah, I think but we also need to be realistic and say, well, if it's okay for Scotland to have a full pack of hounds pushing out foxes, why isn't it okay in England and Wales?
David Thomas, final word from you, the Secretary of the Federation of Welsh Farmers Packs. Presumably you would not accept that there's an element of fun in this. This is pure farming practice for you, is it?
Well, I mean, there are two. There's the Master of Foxhounds registered packs, which Peter was talking about, and the farmers' packs in Wales and also in the north of England and Devon area are funded by farmers paying a subscription on their sheep. They see it as an insurance policy. Well, more prior to 2005, it was an insurance policy. It isn't much. It's not much of an insurance policy now because we're not effective anymore. To see that you don't lose more lambs in the spring. That's it, basically.
All right, well, we'll have to leave the argument there. David Thomas, Secretary of the Federation of Welsh Farmers Packs, thank you for joining us on the line from Wales. Dawn Varley, Director of Campaigns from the League Against Cruel Sports, thank you. Hugh Warwick, ecologist and author, and Peter Brook from Bailey's Hunting Directory, both of you here in the studio in London with me. Thank you all for joining us today. This is The Voice of Russia from London. I'm Tim Eckott. Goodbye.